I know we're back again. It seems like we were just here talking about the census, except now it's the 2020 census. And we have done a lot since the last time we talked with everyone. So we wanted to get you up to date with where we are at this point in time. So after the 2010 census, I think we, like everyone else, you need to do more with less. So the first thing we did was reduce the number of regional offices that we have nationwide from 12 to 6. So that has a significant impact on us, and we're thrilled we're still in Denver. But with the census, while we're also looking at how can we reduce cost, we're also looking at we need to maintain quality, which is something I believe this audience would be particularly interested in making sure that we maintain. And how we were doing that is looking at 4 areas of innovation. I'll be talking about 3 of those areas because I really need your help on one of those. We are looking at increasing the quality of our address list and what can we do before we ever put the first worker out in the field. How can we make it easy for everyone to respond to the census? And how can we leverage the information that's already out there to improve the quality of our administrative records, our address list? And we've also been testing out ways to improve the efficiency of our field work. So in thinking about the census, you think about what are the reasons why we have trouble doing a perfect census, which we know a perfect census is probably never going to be done, but the 2010 census was the most accurate census we have ever conducted. So the first thing is, to me, the most important, and that's the foundation of the census, which is geography. And while we have our expert, Jim Castagneri, here today, who knows all about it instead of myself, we talk about you have to have an address. We have to have a way to link the population that we find with a particular place on the ground. So that address list and making sure we have updated it and perfected it is critically important. So if I don't have an address, I have no way of assigning population to that geographic location. So we want to make sure that foundation is accurate. The second thing is, yes, we may get something to a household, but never get a response. Well, is there a way to find out leveraging, again, information that we already have, is that a vacant unit instead of sending people out repeatedly? So we're looking into that. But the main thing is we have to know what's the status of the housing unit. And the last, and probably one of the most difficult one, is making sure that we have everyone for the household listed, not just 1 or 2. You know, the household is changing, especially here in Denver. As we have moved people in from other parts of the region and into Denver, they have sticker shock on how much it costs to buy a home. So now we're seeing a lot of unrelated people living in the same household, more so than we did 10 or 15 years ago from my perspective. So making sure that we have everyone listed and understanding that that is important. So the first thing that we're doing is doing a road trip, much like what we're talking about today, except much more in depth. And these road trips are really getting people to start to think about the census itself. So in our 12-state region, we've identified 15 locations that we're working to set up. And I neglected to say Angeles Ortega is right over here. She also works with our office, and Angeles has taken the lead in setting up these meetings nationwide. And what we're trying to do is to educate people on, one, the importance of the census, and it's never too early to start planning. So that's why we're really grateful for Elizabeth's invitation today to talk about now's the time to think about what you want to really invest, whether it's time, resources, or what, to make sure that the census is as accurate as possible for your area. So we'll be talking in these big city meetings. This is our plan for the census. We'll be talking about those innovations that we have made and what it looks like for you. But a key thing we'll talk about is our geographic programs. Again, geography, making sure we have every single housing unit listed, and you talked about group quarters, making sure we have all those types of locations listed in our address list. So when we get finished, we can check off and say, I have everything for each one of these, because that's how I evaluate my success. So we'll be talking about in these a lot of what Jim will be talking about. and then Angeles, and eventually we'll have more of Angeleses, talking about how we can engage the communities, the state, starting at the state level and going down to the local level to understand why it's important. The census, yes, we have been asked to do this, but it's really not something we should do to you or for you. It's something we need to do with you. So that's why we're really grateful for partners like Elizabeth that really help us to be much more successful than we would be on our own. So we'll be talking about, with these state meetings, how people can get involved. We'll be talking about, how much the census did cost, which I will cover, and what our timeline is. So, our first innovation that we have made. I've talked about the foundation is our address list. So what could we do between censuses to make sure that we are up with all the changes? So we looked at what are the resources, administrative resources that we have that we can leverage. The first, of course, is the post office, which we work with. I think we work with them monthly now to get updates on what they're seeing on the ground. And I wish the post office had everything, but they don't. So we have to look at what are the other sources for increasing the accuracy of that address list. Well, guess what? Many of you here in the room are part of that in trying to leverage what records you have for growth, new housing units. Could be that you've gotten rid of a few, but what you have added to increase to our foundation, which is our master address file, to perfect it. And one thing I'm kind of excited about is the use of satellite imagery. When we were working in the census and for the state of Nevada, it was very difficult for us to make sure we had all the housing units because we couldn't actually reach certain locations. So before we sent someone out there, we actually used satellite imagery. And what we're doing is we're doing a comparison. What is the most recent record we have based on what we have in our master address file? And we're calling this in-house address canvassing. There's a huge team, about 200 people, that are working on this in our National Processing Center, and they're actually comparing each individual unit, and we're trying to identify, can we add them, or do we have areas where we have a great deal of growth and there's no amount of in-house updating that's going to work, and that's what we're going to need to send out to the field. So reducing the amount of walking on pavement, but if you've got a significant amount of growth, then we're going to have to be walking on some pavement. So that is one of the big initiatives, innovations that we have been working on since the last census. So, was anybody frustrated that you couldn't complete your census questionnaire through the internet last census? And you were scratching your head, why can't the Census Bureau get with it? Well, I did read the business case, and it wasn't cost effective at the time. However, it is now. We're actually hoping that the internet will be the #1 method that people use to respond to the census this time. Our plan is to make it so easy for you that you can just go online, you can go on your mobile phone and complete your census questionnaire. We actually did a test in Houston, and actually Inhouse worked with us on that test. She had people with tablets. They came up to Costco, and we said, let us help you. It's a test. We want to complete your census questionnaire. And we were also able to use what we call non-ID. So I'm at Costco. I'm not carrying around a barcode that tells me how to connect me with a unit you have in a master address file. Well, guess what? You can enter that address without that card, and I can still connect that population with that unit. So we're trying to make things as easy as possible. Last time, when you called our telephone questionnaire assistance center, we could help you, but we couldn't complete your form. Well, that's a change. So we will be able to actually collect that census information over the phone this time. So that's a positive. Does it eliminate paper? No. One of our assistant regional directors, her son just purchased a home up in the mountains, and she said, look at all this. Everybody has a 911 address, but we can't mail to it. These are some of the challenges that we have. We still have to get a questionnaire or something to each one of those housing units. So we'll be walking the street to give them out, but they can still mail it back because they'll have a paper questionnaire, or go on the internet, or call the Telephone Assistance Center. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible and as language friendly as possible. So this is probably the real reason we're here is Jim Castagneri. So I want him to talk about those geographic programs that we are really hoping the local governments will really get involved with and help us get a leg up on the accuracy of the census.
Thanks, Kathy. Good morning, everybody. I heard a lot of trends this morning, talk about trends, and I noticed my own this morning. Rob, where are you? Notice the width of Rob's tie and the width of my tie. Okay? So there's a difference, right?
Those are coming back.
And these suggestions coming from what age cohort? So, look, there's a mouse up here. All right. I'm going to take just a few minutes to talk about some of the census geography programs that we have coming up that help support the decennial that you heard a little bit from Cathy about. And I'm going to touch on each one really briefly. They can be somewhat complicated. Perhaps some of you have heard of these before. Who participated in Luca last time, 10 years ago? Local update of census addresses. Some of you did. Okay. I'm going to talk just a few minutes about each one of these and hopefully give you a little bit more information about how they can work for local governments and local planning organizations. So LUCA is an acronym, of course. We have plenty of those. It stands for the Local Update of Census Addresses. And the effort with LUCA is to allow local governments to help supplement the Census Bureau's master address file. That master list of all the addresses which we use to geocode and conduct the census. We use the LUCA program to reduce the number of deleted LUCA records during field verification. Cathy mentioned that. We do a thing called address canvassing. We're going to do less of that this time. Hope we can save some money. We're going to leverage the LUCA program to help create efficiencies there. We want to reduce the burden and the cost of processing addresses that we receive from a variety of sources. And when a local government provides an address or list of addresses to the Census Bureau, we can find a much greater source of efficiency in doing that. One thing to mention about LUCA, and I'm kind of getting into the nitty-gritty with the program here, if you're familiar with our Boundary Annexation Survey, or BAS, the last line in red here, you may be aware that that's an effort to allow local governments to provide their boundaries to the Census Bureau so that when we tabulate the census to the geography of that government, we tabulate them to the right government. Well, because of the complication associated with that, we are not allowing a BAS submission as part of LUCA. What that means is if you want to review an accurate address list of your jurisdiction for the LUCA program in 2020, you've got to respond to the 2017 LUCA program, which is coming out this December, or I'm sorry, the 2017 BAS program, which is coming out this December. So the Participant Statistical Areas Program, it's also known popularly as the TRACT program. That will be rolling out here in about 2018 or so. This is, if you're a geographer or a demographer or someone interested in statistics of the demographic nature, you're familiar with census tracts, block groups, census blocks, and CDPs. These are things that are all part of the TRACT program. This program, we enlist the input from local governments as well as the state and local planning agencies to help design and refine the plan, the statistical plan for these areas for the next 10 years. So census tracts are modified so that they have a consistency. CDPs are suggested and removed or added if necessary. And these are all statistical entities that help us portray the census data at smaller geographic levels. Our geographic support system is an overall program that allows local governments to submit address information to us, kind of like LUCA, along with road information. As you can imagine, everything is digital these days. Most federal agencies do all of their mapping digitally, and Census Bureau is no different. We have our Tiger system that's been around almost 40 years now. But we are still dependent on local government information to help us keep that information accurate. So we look at the information that might be provided from local governments to see that it meets a minimum address guideline, and we look to see that it can be standardized to match against our master address file, and then we ingest that data into our MAF Tiger system to update our digital map to reflect the local geography as best we can. And I mentioned the BAS before, the Boundary Annexation Survey. Very important for local governments to ensure that their counts are tabulated correctly, because we do tabulation, and it's important to get the count correct, but it's also very important for us to get the counts in the right place. If your boundaries are not correct in the Census Bureau's Tiger system, your count will not be correct. So if you're a local government, check with your planning department, your highest elected official. We'll be sending out the announcements for this next BAS program in December. And we're back to Cathy.
Alrighty. As a taxpayer, I always find this screen interesting. If you look, I had said before, we're trying to reduce cost or avoid cost, however you want to say it. If we would have continued along the same track that we were doing from the 2010 census to the 2020 census, our projected cost would have been $17.8 billion. And as we've said, everybody's trying to do more with less. So these innovations, especially that of address canvassing and a few of those other innovations, for example, in 2010 and 2000, and 1990, I only know because those are the ones I've worked, we had a field office in each one of the congressional districts. That will not be the case. So if you want to go ahead and leak that to somebody, that will not be the case for the 2020 census. We'll have half the number of offices that we had in 2020 in 2010. That means that we will have less staff, but increasing our ability to take advantage of technology is what we're really counting on, and we've actually done some tests and are really, really excited about that. So with this cost avoidance, our projected cost for the census is $12.5 billion, which is slightly above what we had in 2010, but hopefully a huge improvement. Again, a big focus will be on quality and what we can use from an automation standpoint to make sure the quality of our census remains the same. So here's our timeline of activities. Jim's already talked about the boundary and annexation survey, so invitations will be going out next month. Wow. As I said before, we've actually been working really hard on the census since the last one and have already awarded our integrated communications campaign. We actually have our quote-unquote interview with our Y&R team, and they're going to see what they can do to help us leverage new ways to reach communities, to increase that self-response, because self-response is the most accurate way to conduct an actual census. So that is already done. We said before we're kicking off our 15 visits, our 2020 road trips across our 12-state area. The local update of census addresses, invitations will be going out next year. And then, of course, we get the opportunity before every census. We actually test everything from nuts to bolts. So that's 2018. So a lot of us are sitting with bated breath to make sure that everything is working the way we think it will. And in 2019, even though we're out there talking about the partnership and working with people, because geographic programs, that really is a partnership, and what Inhouse is doing and setting up these meetings, we're hoping this is going to yield what we had before, which was complete count committees. And these complete count committees really deciding what's the best way to promote the census to make sure it's as accurate as possible within their local communities. In 2020, that's when you'll really hear that we're around. You'll see advertisements. April 1st is Census Day. It has been before, it will be again. And then really and truly, I mean, we're really quick. So we'll be opening offices late 2019, and we're wrapping it up and out of there by July of 2020. And of course, the counts to the present December 31st and redistricting counts to the states by October 31st. So what we're going to leave each of our states with when we talk is, you know, if you look at the census, it really comes down to three things. It comes down to the knowledge from the data that's provided, which, boy, what a testimony we had earlier. It comes down to the power of the representation, not only at the federal level, but at the state level. But it does come down to the green stuff. So money that's distributed based on census counts. So if people, states, whoever, we know we're not perfect. And if you feel that if you want to help us do the most accurate count possible, look and see, is there some way that you can do low-cost investments to promoting the census, or is it something you need to invest in? And if you do, whether it's staff to help with Luca or other geographic operations, or you want your own ad campaign to promote the census in your area, mostly self-responding, then now's the time to start thinking about that and putting it in the budget. So that's one reason we wanted these meetings earlier instead of later. And then, of course, always looking to, who is it through the states, local governments, that they really want the Census Bureau to work with. So defining those contacts, which we will be asking as we move forward. All righty, so pretty quick, 20 minutes. All righty, she told me, fast. So questions. Hopefully they're all geographic questions.
Okay, so this is not quite about the census, but its sister, the American Community Survey. Is there any, quick one-liners about the status of that in terms of, is it good trajectory, like status quo, or because there was some issues before about, it sort of adopted sort of the long form of the census, right? Sort of became got rolled into ACS. Is that pretty much still on charging along?
Yeah, the American Community Survey, we're still collecting the census on a monthly basis. I'm not sure if this is what you're talking about. Some of the areas are our smaller or less populated areas. We did a sample shift in 2012, and our early results is that the accuracy is increasing. I'm not sure if that's what you were talking about or not, but we're still out there. My group's out there every single month.
I was wondering, does the census include the military personnel that are at these bases, or how does that work?
Okay, so we actually do count most of the military through administrative records. So yes, we do count the military.
What about the homeless?
Okay, so my interpretation is we count the components of the homeless. So, and actually for Denver, it was a kind of an interesting, they had a great complete count committee that helped to define, what are the components of the homeless and what do we need to focus on. And that falls under our category of group quarters. So what we did was we tried to make sure that we had a listing of all those facilities that house the homeless. So we had a night where we actually went and counted the people who were there. We actually went to street and shelter locations, that's what it's called. And then we actually counted the people who were on the streets, and there are various components. We called it counting the components. So we did actually do that in 90, 2000, and 2010, and we'll do it in 2020.
I think this question's for Jim. Good
Oh,
morning.
goody.
Rob Larson, City of Thornton. When we work in the Luca program, do you get particular heartburn from a slice of the kind of unit type universe more than others?
If this will go.
You need to get up.
No. That does give us heartburn. And in fact, for this decade, we're going to require that if you have multi-unit information that it's included. 10 years ago for the Luca program, we allowed just a filler, like 101 Main Street with the suggestion that there were subunits. We won't accept 4 listings for 101 Main Street unless we see unit A, B, and C, because it led to too many errors on our part trying to figure out where that was.
So locals pay attention to your multifamily.
Yes, if that's the message to deliver, please pay attention to that. That would help us a great deal. Thank you.
So my question is just about the budget. You showed a slide in which the budget for the next centennial, or what is it, the
Decennial census.
Census is significantly a lot lower. And I'm wondering, what are the implications for the state and for our rural communities and for our multi-unit housing if we are unsuccessful in being able to collect all the information we need to? I'm concerned if your budget is going to really impact, those impacts will have, significant impacts for us?
Okay, it's the quality of that address canvassing is really critical. We did a lot of work to see how much we could do in-house without walking on the ground. When we hire people, that's where a lot of our expense comes in. So the research that we have done to date, and actually I had the privilege of going to our National Processing Center and seeing how they do it. They're actually looking at every single block and every single address and matching up based on the most recent records we have compared to what we had in 2000. And if that change is greater than a certain percent, that's coded, it has to go to the field. Right now, those results are a little less than 20%. And we'll see, but we're not close to even finished. We're not even halfway through with this work. So that could change as we go through. I will tell you that from field division standpoint, we make a commitment to do a quality job, and we're watching very closely the results of this. And we'll be getting results of actually doing a double check on what our office, we're taking some of the results of our office ad can and comparing it to the ground to see what that error rate is. And again, so far it's looking pretty good. So now the other thing you might say is, we had the stimulus funding in 2010. We're not anticipating we're going to have that. So we had a huge group of people we were able to hire from the partnership program to really promote the census. We're not going to have those funds that we had last time. So that's something that you will see. So, but as far as getting the addresses, we feel pretty confident at this point that that's going to be on target. And if it's not, we'll be in the field.
I'm sorry if this is off topic, but I'm not sure where else to ask it. We have a lot of overlap with Hispanic, with race. How are you going to handle that on the questions and how that's divided up?
Okay, so the race question and the origin question are two different questions, so I'm not sure if I'm going to answer this correctly for you. So when people fill out their race, then they fill out that, and then they're asked, are you of Hispanic origin? And if they say yes, it's two separate questions. So I'm not sure if I'm answering that question for you or not. So you get the numbers by Hispanic or non-Hispanic, and then you'll get the numbers by race.
Well, and part of our problem is that when people, they go in and they get it as a race, and we know that some of the slides from previous presentations this morning have shown it as a separate category, and so it looks like you can't divide out other races from Hispanic when you show it, and it showed that really long Hispanic, but it also showed white, black, and Asian Pacific. So that's where we were trying to make sure that when we've had some people report data for Aurora, for example, that is not accurate because they're combining those Hispanic as a race. So I didn't know if there would be any way to make sure that those numbers are completely separate when they're reported.
Okay, so I'm actually going to ask you to talk to Inhouse
Okay.
to make sure we can get an answer back to you, because I don't think I answered that.
So how will addresses be handled on properties where they don't get mail delivery? We have a huge amount of a community that it's P.O. Box delivery only, no door-to-door at all. How is that handled?
We actually have quite a bit of that in the state of Colorado and definitely throughout our region. So what we're going to do is, so when in those areas, if we even do like where Vicky's son bought a house, so we're going to have to actually go out as we are checking our address list. We'll be actually trying to complete a census question with them. If they're not there, we'll leave the questionnaire there, and they can choose to mail it back or call or go online. So they will get a questionnaire, but it's going to be hand delivered.
Thank you.
All righty. Well, thank you very much.